Hi there. I recently produced a video about the Rhodesian Light Infantry 51st Regimental Birthday Parade that was held in Cape Town in 2012. And I noticed now in 2020, looking at the images of that parade, how many guys are no longer with us. Colonel Trevor Desfountain, is not with us anymore. Neil Jackson's not with us anymore. Hinton Jarbeck, Dave Greenhalgh. And some of these guys had incredible stories to tell. Trevor was a fantastic storyteller. There's no way, I've heard most of Trevor's stories, but there's no ways I can tell a story the way Trevor used to tell it, and used to have us in fits of laughter. And he was so graphic and such a skilled storyteller. And sadly, those stories have gone to the grave with him. And I just wish I'd interviewed Trevor, earlier and captured some of these stories on video, because they would have been totally epic. And so I decided to do a series of interviews, get to as many of the fighting men of Rhodesia as I could, and try and record some of the highlights of their lives and some of the incredible stories that they have to tell. But I'd like to ultimately, in collaboration with Hannes Wessels, so I'm doing a collaboration with Hannes, who many of you know already, who's a well-known author of Rhodesian War books, and Hannes is going to help me do some of these interviews as well. And I will also be putting in the description links to some of Hannes's books and his website, etc. So if you are interested in having a much more in-depth look at some of the stories that we're going to touch on in these interviews, then you need to actually get the book in order to have the full story, because obviously we can't go into that sort of detail, because then the interview would last for hours. If you want to watch the whole series, then please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, so that every time we release a new interview in the series Fighting Men of Rhodesia, you'll be notified that that video is coming up. Thank you very much.
Rich, how did your sojourn at the School of Infantry end?
Well, Hannes, I'd like to be able to say that I passed with flying colours and went on to have a brilliant sort of career as a junior officer. Well, in fact, I didn't. I dropped the ball on a couple of occasions. One of them was the guard commander. I expected him, well, I don't expect him. I told him to cover for me because I wanted to go and actually have a piss up for the boys back in the Salisbury. They just come back from the bush. And unfortunately, when I came back to camp, I was docked as AWOL and put in a little prison cells there that had a School of Infantry. So that was touch and go. And I think the final coup de grace, which was actually very silly on my part, there was a dining in night, and Mac McIntosh and I decided we'd have just a few little beers before the official dining in night. And what started off as a few beers ended up us dancing on the bar in our stick boots and underwear. Why underwear? I have no idea. And we were drinking out of an ice bucket full of beer when the whole crowd actually was filing in to the official dinner.
And all the women in their finery.
All the women in their ball gowns, and all the course officers, Major Burford, who was absolutely astonished to see this performance. And by then we'd lost total track of time, and you can imagine what went on there. And we both had official dates for that night, Mac and I just remember mine just crying, calling me an absolute bastard, and disappearing into the night in a ball gown, never to be seen again. So it was back to the stocks again, in underwear and stick boots, and you can imagine the red cap actually thought this was hilarious actually. But the next day actually wasn't so funny, because it was kitted up and left, right, double quick time into the boss's office, RSM behind me, and I've got a good dressing down. And told basically unbecoming of an officer general into the Rhodesian Army, and you being RTU'd back to your unit, yeah.
And what sort of reception did you get back at SAS from Brian Robinson?
Well, basically, what all the guys did that I've been with at that stage for 10 months, when I went to say goodbye to them, they just said, remember, you'll have to salute us in 3 months' time, 4 months' time when you see us. And they all had a good laugh and slapped me on the back and told me what an idiot I'd been, right? Which was obvious. So when I got back to the SAS, I thought I could sneak back into the Corporals Club and just, you know, have a few beers with Grant and King and Hayden. But that wasn't meant to be. I got Mike Curtin, actually, Captain Curtin, said to me, boss wants to see you. And, well, same Major Robinson tore a strip off me. It's pretty apt, actually. So he said, I'm putting you back in the bush for the rest of your contract, and you're not going to come out. And that's exactly what happened. So it was back to the bush again, back in Mozambique again, in my 4-man stick. Yeah.
Oh, dear. Okay.
Yeah, it was so close to the end, I thought I had it in the bag, Hannes, to be quite honest. But I dropped the ball, and that was it, yeah.
Rich, tell us about some of the personalities that you worked with in Salute Scouts who made an impact on you. I'm sure there were a lot of them, but which ones stand out?
Well, in fact, Hannes, there were just so many. You'd need like 2 hours just to go over, you know, even 5 or 6 of them. As you know, the main reason that I wasn't Salute Scouts was to work in small teams with the main operators, which was Chris Schullenberg, Tim Callow, and John Gardner, who I worked with in the SAS, who was an Australian outstanding operator, and I believe he's just written a good book too. So that was the original nucleus. And of course, we had Martin Chikondo, Stephen Mpofu, Nika Newton, who were exemplary black operators. There was a few people, including myself, that were attached to small teams. In other words, we were working our way into becoming full-fledged members. What Shullies was looking for was a certain lateral thinking, whether or not you were able to get on the ground thousands of miles away and conduct a recce of a particular camp and be self-sufficient. So he wasn't there to coach you. He wasn't there to tell you how to do your job. He was looking for you to come up with your own solutions to problems. In the early days, Rob Warwicker actually ran small teams and Salute Scouts. And as we know, Rob Warwicker, Captain Warwicker, was an SAS member. Chullies was obviously ex-SAS, and so was Tim Callow, and so was John Gardner. So it was a very small, exclusive club, actually, if you could call it that. Rhonda Daly called it Popsky's Private Army within Salute Scouts that did all the long-range penetration type of recce. And subsequent to that, you had all your small teams. You had your pseudo groups working. So you had, right throughout the country, you had pseudo groups that were working on the ground, finding the tours, all the internal stuff. And then, of course, you had your column scenes, your flying column scenes, which was started off by, I believe, Rick Passaportis, prior to that big raid, Nyadzoni and Fungwi, where Rob Warwicker went in, and his 2RC was once again Tim Callow of small teams, and where that over that 1,000 insurgents was killed. And that's when everybody woke up, and we realized that, whoa, Salute Scouts was not just an internal intelligence gathering unit anymore. It was now starting to have some muscle and able to do external, which of course was the domain of the SAS. And I have to say, the SAS were a little bit, I wouldn't say annoyed, but astonished that Salute Scouts could now come into our domain.
Tell us a bit about working with Chris Schillenberg. I know he wasn't the easiest guy to work with. What are your recollections?
Oh, right. Yeah. So I did one operation with Chris Schillenberg. We were deep in Mozambique, calling down airstrikes on groups of ZANLA insurgents that were making their way into the country. And what was quite interesting was how phenomenally, should I say, severe he was to anyone that transgressed his modus operandi. For instance, yeah, if we had like a little forward observation position that we had to walk to, and if you stood on any tiny leaf or anything that was likely to, you know, show a presence that someone had been there, even if it was incredibly small, you know, he'd shake his finger at you. So basically his level of professionalism was out of the ballpark. And I remember him saying to me, right, I'm just going to go and wreck your bridge. And he disappeared for like 4 or 5 days. So I was on my own for 4 or 5 days. I thought, oh, well, I'll just sit here and carry on doing what we were tasked to do and just get on with the job. But I mean, he really, really wanted to work alone. And he felt more comfortable working alone. He felt secure working alone. And that was his way that he liked doing things. Now, to the military brass, this was total no-no. So, you know, but working within Salute Scouts, who a lot of part of the time worked totally unorthodox, he just fitted in brilliantly. So in his small teams, you had to be comfortable with that sort of working environment, you know. And I remember just about we're about to be uplifted. He said to me, you know what, Kapupi? He said, you have to go back and finish what you started. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you didn't finish your officers course. You have to go back and finish it. You can't leave things undone. And so I thought, oh, well, this is kind of like a lesson of life. So in all testament to Uncle Ron Rhodesian, I popped in there and said, you know, I'd like to make another attempt and see how it goes. But he was that type of guy. And what was really amazing about Chile is a lot of people don't realize he was very ethical in his work in the bush. And if he thought things weren't right, or if he wasn't sure of a target, in other words, if there were civilians in the back of these vehicles mixed up with some of the ZANLA insurgents, there's no ways that he would fall an airstrike on it. He said to me, we had to be 100% that the target, you know, was the enemy. So he was very ethical in how he conducted his operation.
You had a chat to Ron Rhodesian and you made a decision.
Yeah, so basically went back to school of infantry, kept it nice and tight this time, and managed to get commissioned. It was interesting that the Batman that recognized me in the school of infantry this time, by now all had grown that long sort of wild hair that they extended to have at that time. So it was quite interesting actually to see the transformation over 2 years. And they said to me, oh, Kafupi, this time you're definitely going to pass. So I said, what makes you think so? They said, oh, no, you've changed. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And what was very interesting was that the sergeants, instructors of school at the time said to me, we don't know what you did the last time, but they said, we have to tell you that the certain officers at school military are determined not to commission you and to keep a very, very low profile and to be on the alert. They said they do not want to commission you. And I largely think it was actually Colonel Rhodesian that managed to get on to certain people then and said, look, you know, cut the shit out, speed it up. Because all of a sudden I was on the regular course and then I was transferred onto the territorial course. So it was very quick. In 6 months, I was in and I was out and commissioned. So somebody pulls some strings along the way somewhere. I'm quite certain of that. But, you know, I towed the line and was commissioned, and then went back to Scouts. Yeah. Now, when I was commissioned, actually, Ron Rhodesian actually arrived. Can you imagine? He arrived by chopper, and he arrived. So that's the type of leader he was. Some arbitrary, member of the unit being commissioned, but he made sure that he was there, and it was quite something. That's the type of man that he was. His management was incredible. He virtually knew every single person in that unit, his strengths and how to work him and how to get the best out of it.
Yeah.
Yes, so SAS was my parent unit. So I was just under the impression I was returning back to my parent unit and everything would be tickety-boo. The first thing happened was that I was put on an officer's assessment course run by Darryl White. All us junior officers were put through our paces at the Urungi TTL. Mike Rich, there was Joe Deploy on it, Paul Cook, and he was actually assessing our bushcraft ability at the time. That was Lieutenant Watt at the time, later Captain Darryl Watt. And what was happening is we were just bumping up with all the time. So we were having more firefights than, but I suppose in a way we were being assessed in a real life setting. And then one evening I was called aside and he said, vehicles are coming tomorrow, get on them, you're doing a selection course. So I was astounded. I said, well, I've already done an SA selection, I'm badged in the SAS. And he said, no. The powers that be have decided that you are doing another selection course. And that was run by Rob Johnson of Matoka. And that selection course nearly killed me. It was very tough, much tougher than one in Yanga. So to this day, I don't know why I had to do another SA selection. I think it was because of being in Salute Scouts. And it was, we want to see if your loyalty is still intact, which was incredible, really. My first op back in the SAS was mine laying. Bob McKenzie said to me, right, you can take the whole of the C squadron then, was A, B, and C squadrons, and there were only like about 20 to 30 people in each squadron, which is amazing, really. It's the size of a platoon, really. And go and do some mine laying in Mozambique on the main road to Malvernia, where a lot of the insurgents were coming up by vehicle. The trains had already been blown by small teams in the Sleuth Scouts a year before anyway. So it was just fortuitous that a big group of 80 walked into my ambush position and we were able to eliminate over 40 of them. So it was just being very, I wouldn't use the word lucky, but it was a good start to being back in the unit. So in other words, it started off on the right foot and it tended to just go from strength to strength. So I had actually a good couple of years, well, not probably 2 years until 1980, until it was all over.
Yeah, when Bruce Nelgar was killed in the accident, I think it was at 78, I went up for the funeral and Tufty Bates was the CO, and at the wake afterwards, Tufty said to me, I want you to come around, I want you to come with me in the car. I didn't know where we were going. Anyway, we drove around the battalion, past the quartermaster's store and turned right, went down to 3 Commander and took me upstairs and the whole commander was in the room. And old Noel Smee, who was one of the subbies, came to me and said, 3 magic words. And I said, well, yeah, I don't know what 3 magic words. And he said, drinks all round. So I said, okay, drinks all round. So, and I was the new OC, and I think John was there as well. Anyway, went straight into the Fire Force thing. RLI was doing tremendous amount of Fire Force. I mean, high kill rates. And absolutely loved the Fire Force concept, loved the adrenaline rush it gave you. It was probably one of the most exciting things to be in command of, that airborne envelopment. And it was like playing a game of chess from the air, positioning your troops, doing the dummy drops, doing the sweeps, putting in airstrikes, casevacing guys, working with the blues. It was a tremendous job. And I think Nigel Henson, if I remember correctly, and he was a fantastic KK commander, who I have a huge respect for. He's had the record for, I think, 8 contacts in one day.
Sure.
I can't claim anywhere near that. I think the most I had in one day was 5, but even 5 is a tremendous amount of punch-ups to go into. And at the end of the day, when you come back, you feel like you've been writing exams, you know, for university or something. You're totally drained. Your mental sort of, you'd want to have one beer and then collapse, you know. But it was a tremendous adrenaline rush, fighting a battle from up top there in that observation point. I remember bringing in Canberra Alpha bomb strikes, and the Canberras came underneath me in the K car, and then they would let go of these, and they had these pods either side of the aircraft and drop 500 bombs at one time, or in pockets, wherever they wanted to do them, you know. And we had this was in the Bight Bridge area, and they dropped all these alpha bombs, and it was the most amazing thing to witness from the air, because you were right above them, and these bombs, these explosions were going off, and it was like being on corrugations, you know, in that aircraft, because you were bouncing with all the explosions underneath you, and seeing the guys run and falling over and all the rest of it. And then when the K car would open fire and the 20mm cannon would engage, every now and again you had a direct hit, and there was just this orange flash, and it had been nailed, would just disappear, vaporized. It was just the most amazing thing to witness from the air. So it was very, very exciting, and I was very lucky, and all the time that I did Fire Force, I never had lost one guy, so I was very chuffed about that. So I went to One In-Depth Company. I was the OC at One In-Depth Company for 5 years, and absolutely loved it. It was like being the CEO of a mini battalion. You only reported direct to brigade, and the deal was, you know, you could do anything you wanted to. You could experiment and do all these things and have sport and so on, but just don't make cock up, because you didn't want to be in trouble. And the deal was, if you did well, you got a medal. If you didn't do well, you were, posted or crapped on or whatever. So, but a couple of things in that independent company, just to show you. When I was at Mabalauta with One In-Depth Company, the Grove International Road, I think it was being constructed on the other side of the river in the TTL there, going down to Crook's Corner, that part of the world. And the good presence was quite strong in that area, and they were taking vehicles off the road and burning them and just doing their own way with all this Grove International equipment. And we were told I was tasked by Brigadier Barnard to do something about it. So I had a CID guy there called Greef. I don't remember his first name now, a good guy, a young guy. And we came up with this plan that we were going to hijack one of these tipper trucks ourselves, which we did do, and we took the driver and his 2RC and said, right, you're not allowed to go anywhere, you stay here with us. We looked after him with grub and gave him beers and everything and cokes, and so on. He was fine. We parked the vehicle under the canopy of the vegetation on the side of the river, and we hit it with camouflage nets and everything. The reports went in the vehicle. It was being stolen by the Greeks. The aircraft went up and looked for it for a week, and then everything went quiet. And this was now our cue to do something about it. And the guys sandbagged the rear of the vehicle, and we practiced on the airstrip. And then when we thought things were right, we did our first ride. And I was in the back with the guys. There were 5 of us in the back. Don't know why there were 5, but anyway. Semi-automatic shotguns, Browning shotguns, and folding butt AKs.
So now you're inviting a hijacking or an attack of some sort?
Yes, we want these guys to come and give us a rev. Mm-hmm. And the drill was that Al-Khreef was the driver, because he spoke fluent Shona, and he was blackened up in the front with a balaclava on, and he would hit on the back of the cab if he saw any, or if he was approached by anybody, and that would be our cue to be ready. And then we'd listen, and we heard them, we'd engage. First morning we went out with this plan. We hadn't even been going for 20 minutes when suddenly bang bang on the back of the vehicle. Everybody, wow, what's going on? And then these voices, these guys started, hey comrade, this, and all the rest of it, talking to old Greef, And that was our cue. We came over the side of the vehicle, of the dungeon were shooting down at like, I don't know, 5 yards max, 6 feet in some cases, with shotguns and AK. There was a group of 9 goose. Didn't know that at the time, but when it was over, we established that. We killed 7, and we wounded 1, and 1 guy got away, but he dropped his gat. So it was a great success, and we were then able to tell brigade what we had done.
And then, Don, you actually did some recce work as well.
Yes, you know, having been found a member in the Scouts and all that, I was quite upset that I didn't get to do that kind of work, because I loved that idea of pussyfooting around by myself or with another guy with a small team. And so I trained up my own guys, again, national servicemen, and we formed a recce team. And the SP guy was only too chuffed to give us the weapons and the kit and equipment to do it, because the int was coming back to him and made him look good, you know. And there was a huge Zipra presence in that Matetsi area, thank you. And they were coming in and out from Botswana at sort of Lib, and so we decided to take a group in there and have walkabout and see what we could find out. And we crossed, one evening we crossed the border with the moon phase right, but the drill was just to go a short distance in, get across the road, the main road going down to from Kazangula to
Big Falls,
Francistown.
Francistown, yeah.
And then set up and then try and pick up some int and see what tracks we could pick up, and if we could have any set up an observation point on the road, Anyway, early in the morning to get my bearings, because it was a very, very flat area and hard to map read in Botswana, then featureless, you know. We were all in a little 360, 6 of us. I take a normal recce team was 4, but I had 2 extra guys that I was training. And so we were in a little 360, and the guys had their packs against the trees with mapani, very scant vegetation, that yellow fine grass that you get in that part of Madabi land. And little gas cookers were going, and I cooking tea and water boiling for tea, when suddenly I heard this clicking, and it was Finn O'Donoghue, who's the one guy on the left, 11 o'clock position, and he was giving me the time, you know, quite sort of frantically, thumb down, and then I could hear this noise, and these guys were coming towards us, and it was a large group, and the guys that were on that side, I was in the rear of the circle, I was like at 6 o'clock position at the bottom, and they counted them, and there was 100 coming out of Rhodesia in file, walking back to their camp in Botswana. And they had one of their own guys tied up, warped up with wire, and a guy was assigned as a guard and was prodding him with an SKS bayonet in the back, and they were giving him a rev and talking about, oh, you let the side down and you're a coward, and wow, we're going to sort you out, or whatever. And that is why they missed us, because they walked 20 meters from us, and we just lay there with our hearts in our mouths waiting for this gang to move past us, you know. And it seemed to take forever, and eventually they'd gone past, and then as soon as we waited and they'd gone, I moved position, got us into a culvert on the side of the road where we hid in the culvert, waiting for it to get dark. And then when the moon phase came up, we went out there, myself and Theo Nell, and did a little 360 and picked up the tracks, which was very easy. 100 guys walking in file. And it was this silver path with the moon, you know, in the grass, aerial spoor, and we tracked it. And we went off and we left the other guys there. We went off to go and find out where they'd gone, because obviously they'd gone to a camp. And we came to a very big camp that had pillboxes for sort of sentry posts around the camp. We had identified 3 of them. We were trying to go around the perimeter, when suddenly there was this huge burst of fire inside the camp, and lots of shouting and clapping and guys firing weapons in the air and everything else. And initially we thought we'd been seen and somebody was shooting at us, but then it was very obvious that they weren't. And what we could make out, they'd culled the guy that they were bringing in, they'd executed them. And on leaving the rest of the group to go in and do the close recce, my orders were, okay, if you hear any firing or whatever, we will move to a crash RV and we'll get together there and then we'll make our plan from there. So I up sticks and went to the crash RV, found the guys, got them together, no talking or anything. We got into extended lines, so we were just leaving the tracks of one guy every 5 yards apart if they picked up any movement of us. And we moved into Botswana and did a big arc around about 5 kilometers, and eventually came out well down below the camp. And then found a copse of trees a couple of kilometers inside Rhodesia, and got on the radio and asked for the SB on Mike Howard to come and fetch us, and he picked us up. The report went in. We worked right through the night putting in my report, so the SB had to have the thing typed up and everything, and it went to ComOps. The next day, ComOps sent an aerial photographic run, or whatever they called it, recce, with the Canberras, with a Canberra at 35,000 feet or whatever it was done at. And sure enough, they picked up the camp. My grid reference was pretty good when it worked out. There were no gomos to work from. And the camp was a zipper camp, food transfer supply camp, just west of that big road that we spoke about, and for 550 guys, so it was a pretty big camp. It was kind of sad because they initially did not put in a reaction group to go and take them out because they were worried about the Rhodesians working on the rail line in Francistown.
Political implications.
Political implication. But the big problem was they sent in Scouts guys to verify. They didn't believe a little independent company could come up with that sort of int and that size camp, whatever. They sent in a couple of Scouts guys, and sadly they were compromised and the whole gang split. So it was a bit sort of negative in the end.
Disappointing. Don, I know later on you went back to the RLI, and one of the big battles you were involved in was Op Tepid in Zambia.
Yeah.
Near the town of Siavonga.
Yeah.
I know that was a tough target, as it turned out.
Yeah.
But you were very involved in the whole operation, and it's an interesting series of events.
Correct. I'd just been back in the battalion a week actually when we went. We were called, told we weren't allowed to leave barracks. And then early morning we were flown by DAC down to Kariba with the land tail following. At Kariba, there was a sand model laid out there. Our Tufty Bates was the CO, and Brian Robinson was SAS was there, and they were giving their orders group and so on. And basically it was a battalion position in Zambia on these two ridges. And they were considered to be part of a classical war regiment that was coming. The idea or the aim was they were going to advance along several axes up to Salisbury, one of them being the Chirundu-Salisbury road, and there were going to be tanks and armoured cars and so on and so on, but this was the first advance guard, if you like, for that advance. SAS had been in and done the recce. The one aircraft run that Bob McKenzie was in, the Lynx, took a lot of rounds, and the undercarriage was shot out, and he had to do a forced landing back at Kariba, which was really interesting. Anyway, they had done their recce, and guys had been on the ground, and they had established there were these two big mountain range. It was more than a hill range. It was like two mountains running parallel to each other, and in the middle of it was the admin area with a little pan. And 3 Commander under myself was to attack the rear position, the one ridge, and 1 Commander with P-10 was to attack the front ridge. And it's a two-pronged attack. And we were to go in the next morning at first light, using the cheetahs or those Hueys. And I brought up at the orders group, funny enough, and got a rev about it from both Robinson and Ian Bates. I said, well, you know, with these positions being that close, what about if they got heavy weapons like 12.7s or 14.5s, whatever? They're not going to rev us on the ground roll. Because they'll be mutually supporting if they're a classical war thing. Ah, you're getting shot away, you're talking about School of Infantry stuff, don't worry, we've got air support and we'll have this and we'll have that. Well, the next day when we went in, I couldn't believe that we went with the choppers right over the position. I was looking out, you know, there was no doors on the chopper, I was looking out the side and could see the in the trenches. They had bunkers and everything, and they were just cowering down. They could have taken us all out if they'd wanted to. But a considerable amount on top of each ridge. Anyway, we landed, the attack went in. They did exactly what I said they would probably do with the heavy machine gun, and they revved us in the ground roll. Pete Heen's position was revving our position, and our position was revving them. And when afterwards, the next day when we went through, and we'll get to that, but there was a field telephone line laid from the one ridge to the other. So they were talking to each other on the field telephones and saying, you know, these guys are coming up here now and they're on our left flank or whatever, give them blast with the 14.5s, or you can imagine how they were doing that. And they were firing 75 recoilless at us, and we were under heavy 82 mortars. So it wasn't an easy thing. We had, I know Pete Heen, one commander, had 15 guys wounded. Luckily nobody killed. I had my first guy, Andy Horton, one of the Horton twins, his brother Nigel, in fact, 3 commander guys are with contact with now, he's back in Harare. But they were together, and old Andy Horton was shot in the head and died. And but a very, very well defended, difficult thing to do, you know, to attack a defended position where they dug in. And when they had all the hard stuff with them, they also had cleared fields of fire and so on. And anyway, we got a massive rev. We couldn't go forward, we were pinned down. The aircraft couldn't come in because there was low cloud, so that all was out the window. Small window of opportunity came in one time right towards the end, and the hunters were able to throw down 30mm fire and rockets and some golf bombs, but it didn't really do anything. That night, under heavy fire, they had 122 rockets as well, which were exploding behind us because of their range, but very, very demoralizing because of the 64 kg warheads exploding and the whole sky being alight and everything else. They did a typical classical war window, shop window effect, and under all that fire, they did the escape, and they had their route planned and everything else, and that was where Dave Greenhouse was with his little team back at base. The CO had picked up through intercept that they were withdrawing, and he quickly scratched together a group of guys. Old Brian Lewis was 2RC with Dave Greeny, and they went in there, and these guys, none of them even fired weapons, you know, a lot of them. And these blokes, 400 or whatever it was, walked right past them, and guys stopped and had a pee right next to them and that kind of thing. And old Dave Greenhouse was criticised for not opening up on these guys, and I stood up for him at the debrief, and as far as I'm concerned, he did exactly the right thing. I mean, it was suicide, that sort of gang of guys to go against 400 going past in the middle of the night, hard zipper core guys. The other interesting thing about that whole punch-up was that a year or so later, I was in Civvy Street now.
So after the war's ended?
Yes.
Yeah.
Doing an elephant hunt in the Chilocho area with Simon Rogers, the safari company, and an old American friend of mine, old John Estes. And I noticed this big black guy was working there for Simon as a truck driver, you know, and I noticed that he was very disciplined and that he was different to the other guys. So I approached him, and his name was Kanan Nyati. And I said to him, Kanan, were you a soldier? You know, so he said, yes, I was. So I said, oh, where were you? 1 RER, 2 RER, where were you? He just smiled and he said, no. So I was with whatever Zipra battalion it was, And it turned out he was actually the 2RC of that position that we were attacking. So that night I asked my client if he could come and sit at the fire with us. Offered him a beer. He didn't drink, he had a Coke. And we sat and we talked. And it was very, very interesting to hear his side of the thing. They thought they were being attacked by 1,200 men, and that's why they pulled out. They had just sent off a whole section, big chunk of their battalion to go on resupply, and they were going to be resupplied with vehicles and stuff. And the vehicles, thank God, didn't come in while we were there, but they were expected to bring in new troops. That would have been something else. But it was a battalion position, but an under-strength battalion position, so they weren't 1,000 men, but I think my memory serves me right. If they were all there, it was going to be in the region of 800, but when we hit, there was something like 600 there. So it was pretty strenuous stuff. When we took the position the next day and swept through, we found 14.5 guns that were firing at the hunters. We found the gunners laying sprawled over the guns. They were very, very brave guys, I want to tell you. And they did an outstanding job firing back at those hunters. And you talk to the hunter pilots afterwards, my goodness, they couldn't believe the flak that was coming up at them. But the gunners were killed on the guns, and they were there. They had an underground hospital where guys were in bed with drips in and so on. It was well organized. And they were the guys that were going to come up and do that advance to Salisbury.